Welcome. The movie Batman and Robin may be one of the most hated Batman films of all time, but to me, it's good entertainment. The movie's like a mix between the campy 60s Batman while trying to be dark and gritty at the same time. That's hilarious. But my main reasons why I pardon this movie and even dare to say that it's better than the latest Batman live action products these days is because it still retains that Schumacher Gotham City atmosphere. It's got a killer soundtrack score, beautiful set designs, actual props, costumes, and practical effects. Nothing but the good shit that movies are missing these days. Joel Schumacher directed both this and Batman Forever. That movie was my favorite Bat flick so far. It used to be The Dark Knight, but now that's my second favorite live-action Bat flick. Anyways, I've been meaning to analyze the differences between the movie of Batman and Robin and the comic book adaptation of the film, just as I did with the previous 3 Batman films that ended up getting their own comic book adaptations. This one was created by Dennis O'Neil, Rodolfo DiMaggio, Bill Sienkiewicz, Bill S., and Pat Guerrieri. Right away, we're introduced to Mr. Freeze. Like in the movie, he's trying to steal a big-ass diamond, and Batman and Robin arrive just in time to delay his exit. Mr. Freeze's design looks perfect. I love how the suit looks like in the movie as well. You can tell that it took a long time to make. It's very detailed and so practical. I love it. I'm sure this will always be seen as one of the best villain suits in a live-action comic book film. If Mr. Freeze ever gets thrown in a new live-action film these days, you can guarantee that he'll just be an actor wearing a mocap suit, sadly. The artist really got his appearance looking exactly like how he does in the movie. He even looks like Arnold in just about every panel he's in. Sadly, this is not the same positive for most actor resemblances here. I'll explain more on that a little later. As you can see, Mr. Freeze uses a freezing handgun instead of that large freeze gun in the movie. Also, both Batman and Robin have white eyes, like in the other comics and animated shows. It's kinda cool to see that they included this with their movie costume designs. This is something that wasn't done with their designs in the previous Batman movie adaptation comics. So those were a little more accurate to their movie counterparts, but since these weren't as good as the previous movie costumes were, then I think this is a good inclusion for the white eyes on the Batman and Robin suits. It does make them look better in my opinion. Like with the previous adaptations, every scene is summarized within a page or two, so there's not much to compare in that particular difference. The dialogue seems the same, but some actions are altered here, which is what I'm always looking forward to for these comics. The way Victor Freeze became Mr. Freeze is a bit comical here. The glass behind him suddenly breaks and he, along with his wife's body, happen to be next to it. I wonder if this means that the cryo solution liquid mutated her body as well. When Barbara Pennyworth is introduced, she's wearing a business suit instead of her school outfit, which is odd since it's an unnecessary change. The jump that Batman told Robin that he couldn't make, it looked a lot believable in the film version. Also in the comic version, Mr. Freeze does not have thugs driving by his side, so no one ends up crashing here. Batman dives through the Freeze vehicle's windshield, but he does not knock out Mr. Freeze when doing so. Instead, Mr. Freeze is on the ground, somewhat frightened by Batman as he's about to beat the frost out of him. I like the scene where Batman and Robin fight against Bane, one at a time as Poison Ivy tries to manipulate the other. Both versions have an entertaining way of showing it. I like them. But here's where the comic book version does it better. When Batman and Robin begin arguing after Robin is interrupted from Ivy's kiss, Batman actually punches Robin in the face, making him bleed. Whereas in the movie, Batman just tosses him into a pool of Nickelodeon slime. Batman even says, "Damn." We skip on over to the moment after Robin meets up with Poison Ivy at her lair, and in the movie, after Robin reveals that he was using rubber lips to protect himself from her venom, she shoves him into a pool of vines that try to drown him, and then Batman shows up and gets wrapped up in plant vines. In the comic, Ivy does not shove Robin into the pool, and Batman shows up after Robin reveals that he was wearing that protection. Then, she has her plant vines grab the two of them. In both versions, Batgirl shows up and defeats Poison Ivy herself. The fight ends shortly after it begins for both versions, but what I like about Batgirl here is that they also gave her the white eyes with her costume. It looks good. In the comic, Ivy's enormous plant throne does not confine her after she's defeated, as she is not kicked towards it. When Batman, Robin, and Batgirl are heading towards the Gotham Observatory, in the movie, A thug driving Mr. Freeze's vehicle gets in front of their way to try to stop them. Batman disables the vehicle by reflecting the ice blast back at it, and the thug just jumps out of the frozen vehicle, defeated. But in the comic, the thug driving the vehicle is accompanied by a group of hockey thugs firing ammunition at the three heroes. They're also fighting on a frozen lake instead of the frozen streets of Gotham. I'd say this is one of the few events that is better portrayed in the comic. Robin runs over a few of them, Batman takes some of them down as well, and instead of using the freezing vehicle's ice blast on the Batmobile, it fires its own rounds instead, and Batman fires 2 missiles in return. The freeze vehicle gets blasted through the ice and the thug within it sinks to his death as Batman says, "Don't sink and drive." The new suits they wear once they're heading to the Gotham Observatory look like live-action figures in the movie, right? But in the comic, they don't look too bad. In fact, there are 3 panels where Robin looks like he's finally wearing his blue-shaded Nightwing suit, and Batgirl looks like her suit was designed in the Christopher Nolan universe. So it's cool. And Batman's new suit serves a better purpose here than it did in the movie, because after Mr. Freeze uses his freeze gun on Batman, his new suit's cape is ice resistant. I like this inclusion because it not only makes better use of his new suit, but it's also like a callback to the previous film, Batman Forever, where Two-Face tries to burn Batman alive, but he uses his cape to protect himself from the flames, and it shows that his cape is actually fire resistant. An interesting note to mention after Mr. Freeze fights Batman for the last time is that he actually uses his large freeze gun from the movie. Yeah, the creators of this comic decided to include both the one from the movie and a handgun version referencing his freeze gun from the other comics and the animated series. After Mr. Freeze makes Robin and Batgirl fall off the giant telescope, in the movie Robin uses a grappling hook to try and save the two, but it hooks onto a piece of ice and it breaks. This would have failed either way, would have just slipped off, right? So after that fails, Batgirl uses her grappling hook and manages to save the two. But in the comic, Mr. Freeze pulls a lever which opens the platform below Robin and Batgirl, making them fall. Interesting how there would be a lever on the telescope that drops a part of the platform off. But after they begin falling, Robin uses his grappling hook to save the two of them, and it successfully grabs onto something, and he tells Batgirl, "I've got you." And once Batgirl touches the ground, she tells him, "No, I've got you." I guess she's not wrong, but it was better executed in the movie, even though it was obvious that an icicle would be a terrible thing to use a grappling hook on. While the two of them make their way back to the observatory, Batman easily defeats Mr. Freeze once again, only this time we get to see the ass kicking itself, and Batman even makes Mr. Freeze bleed, as he did with Robin. Nice. Robin and Batgirl have a short fight against Bane as well, but since they actually throw a few hits, it's better than nothing since that's what the movie did. Bane shows up, grabs him by the neck, and they kick off the tubes of venom off his mask, making him turn back to normal. In the comic, though, it's a small brawl. It only covers 1 page, but still, better than nothing. After both villains are defeated, they restore Gotham City back to normal, and Batman reveals to Mr. Freeze that Poison Ivy tried to kill his wife, but they managed to prevent that from happening. He then gives his underappreciated speech to Victor Freeze and convinces him to help Batman save Alfred from McGregor's Syndrome Stage 1. The way it's all presented in these final pages really are some of the best shots in the comic. You can feel the emotion during Batman's speech, like it was in the movie. Many don't want to admit this, but it's a damn good speech. In all the previous Batman films, every villain never changes their ways. They either died a villain or lived long enough to stay a villain. But Victor Freeze is the only one who redeems himself by the end. And I think people gotta appreciate that. Here's something that I did not mention about the very first page in the comic, because it completely throws this whole comparison out of proportion. I don't know why, but apparently we are shown in the first page that Batman and Robin were just actors, and this whole story was just a movie in production. Isn't that weird as hell? And to make matters even more confusing, this never gets brought up again. Not even at the end. Well, unless you count this tiny little text at the bottom right side that says, "That's a wrap." So, why was this done? What was the purpose of saying that this entire comic book adaptation was just a movie being made? If you ignore the first page and this little text in the last page, You would have never known that this comic book adaptation was not about the real Batman and Robin, and instead it was really just about the actors like George Clooney, Chris O'Donnell, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Uma Thurman, Michael Gough, and Alicia Silverstone, and John Glover just doing their job. It is possible that the reputation of the film made the comic book illustrators feel like they might be getting hate for their adaptation of the film. I mean, this would seem like the safest way to approach this adaptation, don't you think? Personally, I think this was a pretty good comic book adaptation of the movie. But one thing this comic is missing is the appearance of Schumacher's Gotham City with all those neon lights and vivid colors. The art style in this comic looks alright. It's not as good as Jerry Ordway's artwork in the comic adaptation of Tim Burton's Batman, nor can it be compared to the illustration art of the Batman Forever comic. But I'd say it's around the same quality as the artwork from the Batman Returns comic. The artist got Alfred's appearance accurate to the actor portraying him with just about every shot he's in. Poison Ivy looks like Uma Thurman only when she's wearing her costume. There's only one image where Bruce closely resembles George Clooney. And there's one panel where Dick Grayson closely resembles Chris O'Donnell. The art style isn't bad, I mean it's leagues better than my own art style, but there aren't enough images that resemble the actors. A lot of them come close, but that's just it. There are plenty of bad ones that simply needed an extra touch on details, or others that should have been fixed. Like right here, Dick Grayson's ear appears to have been bitten off. Or here, where Barbara looks like she has a little mustache on the side of her lips, which appears to look like it's a worm nibbling on her little mustache. I like that you can't see Batman and Robin's eyes or Batgirl's eyes when they're wearing their masks. I like the shot of Poison Ivy when she's introducing herself to everyone, but since this comic summarizes every scene in the movie, they all lose the impact that came with most of them. When Bruce and Dick are arguing after Mr. Freeze was captured and taken to Arkham Asylum, they only have one panel of dialogue arguing. And in the same page, Dick gets flipped over by Barbara after he surprises her in the garage. They don't even have the race later on either. So the entire race between Dick, Barbara, and the biker thugs is absent in this comic. Not that it truly matters, I guess, since Gotham City in this comic does not resemble Schumacher's Gotham City, which is a damn shame. There are many pages that look like they needed more colors to resemble it. Some of them felt flat and expressionless, but the very few pages that weren't bad looked gorgeous. It's what I hoped from the other panels that they would look like, especially with this whole thing that was all meant to be like a movie in production. Next time, we'll be taking a look at the differences between another Batman movie to comic adaptation, Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. In the meantime, check out the other videos discussing the differences between the previous Batman movie to comic adaptations. My favorite so far would have to be the Batman Forever comic adaptation. It's everything I was hoping to see, only it was missing the unique designs for Gotham City thugs, but it was still great. Let's see if we can say the same thing for the comic adaptation of Batman Begins next time. That's it for the video. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button to give this video a chance to grow. I'd like to thank all my Patreon supporters for their impeccable generosity. Your support means a lot to me, and you are part of the reason why I try to make the best content that I can. And if you like this content, check out the rest of my channel. You'll find more entertainment from separate franchises I like to cover, such as Mortal Kombat, Dragon Ball Z, Celebrity Deathmatch, Men in Black, The Mask, Batman Comics, The Terminator, TMNT, Dino Crisis, Resident Evil, and more. If you're a Patreon supporter, check out my exclusive videos such as the Gantz content. And if you'd like to show your support, go to my Patreon and support the channel, which is only $1. Sacrifice that McChicken for extra quality content, my friend. But anyways, I'll see you all in the next video, and remember to have an awesome day.